welcome to the second stop into our parenting around the world in the year 2020. This is a special collaboration for Mama Tortuga. And today we have a wonderful, wonderful family coming straight from Japan. We're gonna Japan. So let's wait for them to join. Hi, Caleb.
Hello, how can I pronounce your name? Is it Joanna or Johanna?
Joanna.
Joanna, okay, así como en español, Joanna.
Sí, muy bien. Me imaginé que hablabas español.
Más o menos, sí, mis abuelitos son de México. Aquí en Japón no hay oportunidad de hablar español, pero más o menos.
Muy bien. So, for those who don't know Caleb is living right now in Japan with his wife. And how many children?
Yes, we have one daughter.
One daughter. And one of the reasons I invited them to this roundup of parents around the world is because I am very, very curious about finding out how they're parenting in this year, and it's very challenging year, and also because they're a multicultural family. So I love to hear their perspectives, especially in the notions that we are exploring in this series. And also, we will go through the notions first, and then Caleb is going to talk a little bit more about what he's doing and where he's living and who he is, because actually that's something that I think is very important. So do you mind if we start?
Well, yeah, let me introduce myself quickly. So my name is Caleb. I'm from California. My wife is Japanese. I came to Japan 13 years ago, and I'm an English teacher mainly, and I also create fun bicultural events for international tourist families so that their children can meet and play with local Japanese children. So I'm trying to grow that project of mine. But thank you, Joanna, for inviting me today. And it's your show, so please lead the way.
No, it's everybody's show, first of all, and I think this is a very important part of raising children in the world at this moment. I do believe like we're raising global citizens at this moment. And as we can see more than ever, around the world, all of us are dealing with a lot of situations. But I'm very intrigued and curious about how you see, from your own perspective and from where the community you're living at, the notions that we are exploring in this series, which is, first of all, the notion of freedom. From what I can see, every community, every society has a different turn or their own meaning of freedom. So how do you see freedom in the way that you're raising your own children, your own daughter?
Yeah, that's a broad question. But what first comes to mind is, like right now, children here in Japan, they're not really going to school, but they're still receiving homework, and they're obligated to continue doing their studies at home. So I guess, children here in Japan are expected to do their homework even without the help of their teachers because they're not going to school. They can maybe get it from their family, hopefully parents. But I guess, they have a lot of freedom to kind of do this on their own, and that's really tough, I think. In contrast, my daughter, she went to California last year, and she stayed there for an entire school year. I think it was about 11 months in total. And so there, I feel like in California, she had a lot of freedom, more than in Japan, maybe to play, and they don't have so much homework to do after school. they're not really obligated. I mean, if they turn their homework in, they turn it in. If they don't, it's no big deal. So I think that's something that pops up into my mind first. I mean,
Uh-huh.
when it comes to freedom,
Yes,
So
this
it,
is interesting because I'm assuming that you were raised in California. So in your mind, the notion of freedom is very attached to what you think is, like what the freedom you felt growing up, or what your own understanding of freedom is. And I'm actually I'm a little bit curious about the understanding of your wife, which I assume she's Japanese, and how she perceives the notion of freedom. Because I think right now at this point I'm very interested in hearing, like, like the perspectives from parents. Like we hear and we talk so much about freedoms and personal freedoms, but I mean, from what I've seen is that all our freedoms are also very conditioned to the societies we are living at, or the communities we are living at. So what I'm hearing is that your child is kind of like really, like expected in Japanese society to really perform, even though she's not going to school. And you perceive that she had way more freedom when she was living here in California.
Right, that's right. Yeah, exactly right. And I think that carries over not just when we're talking about primary school or junior high school. It also carries over into adulthood. So, for example, when you are in California and you're an adult, you have the freedom to change your hair color to pink or green or whatever, and people they feel that's your way of expressing yourself. And in Japan, Japanese society, you're expected to keep your hair, if you're Japanese, keep it black. Even there are some students in high school in Japan that they try to change their diet to light brown, and even with just light brown, they can get called into the principal's office, and they can be told, oh, you should probably change it back to your natural hair color, which should be black, right?
Uh-huh.
So, my daughter is definitely kind of, I don't know if she's feeling strangled here in Japan. Not yet. I mean, still, kids can
Yeah,
be
how
kids.
old is she?
She
How
is
old?
not, she's 9.
Okay, so it will be very interesting to ask her to ask her perspective, because I guess at her young age she was able to perceive the differences between living in American California society and Japanese. You guys are in Osaka?
Yes, that's right. Osaka is in central Japan.
Okay. So yeah, because I think that's also a very important point of saying, like, when I started this series, I wanted to put in the base that, even though there are people that are living in the same country, there are different subcultures inside one country. So it's so important to know where we are, and where we are raising our children, because bottom line, I think this gives us a perspective of, like, why do we perceive the things the way we perceive them. So the second notion that I'm asking in this series is the notion of community. So who is your community? Who is the community for your child, and what's expected from you with your community?
So yeah, in Japan, especially in the big cities, for example, Tokyo, Osaka, Yokohama, we in big cities, big homes are very rare because of the property value. It's so expensive. People basically live in apartment buildings, so we all use the same elevator or the same stairs. We see our neighbors every day. Children are taught to always greet neighbors in the elevator, for example. So I think that we see our neighbors constantly. Every time we go out of the house, there's a park in front of our home. People might be resting in the home, taking a break there. So it's very common. And also, we're all using the same bicycle parking lot because in the city, we don't commute by car. We commute by bicycle, basically. So we're all, using the same facilities. And it's great because I know all my neighbors on my apartment floor. And that's kind of our community. So I really enjoy seeing the older people. Most of them are olders on our floor. Above our floor, we have one family. I really enjoy that community. And then for my daughter, her community, at the moment, due to the pandemic, she's not going to school. But, typically, the teacher is like a second parent for a child in Japan because fathers might be working all day. They come back late at night. So children kind of start to view their teacher as a second father or a second mother. So that's part of their community. And they and in Japan, if you do terrible at your grades, you are still going to move up with your group into the next grade. In California, it is possible to, if you do too badly, you can repeat a grade. But in Japan, they don't do that. They want everyone to move up together.
Oh, interesting. And is it true that in Japan the teachers also visit their students, like if they feel like something is going on or they need to they go to their houses, they are allowed to go to their houses and talk to the students and the parents?
That's right. It is. For example, the new teacher of the last school year for my daughter, before the school year began, she went to every household of her students, and wow. She was welcomed inside and kind of had like a cup of tea with the parents and got to know the parents first before she even began teaching children. So that's kind of expected, and that's kind of part of their job, right? So they want to get to know the parents and understand the background. Maybe one parent maybe is too busy working, or maybe there are some family issues, and they're kind of curious because they feel it's their responsibility to really take care of the child. So yeah, basically classes contain about 35 students. So before the school year begins, the teacher would visit the household of every student.
Wow. So it seems like there's a very extended community sense, but also it's very tied to the third notion in our series, which is responsibility. It seems like there's a lot of responsibility instilled, especially in younger generations in Japan. There's a lot of the things that are expected from them. And I wonder if that's kind of like also part of, what the community needs, but also why the community in Japan is accustomed to. I'm a little bit curious about, because all I know is, from the places that I've been living at in the United States, and I was born in Colombia. So I was able to contrast a lot of the notions and the meanings for these words. But what about in Japan? What's the responsibility of the individual and especially the children growing up in that community?
For example, children here, they travel to school by train. and they're expected, obviously, they have a responsibility to get to school on time. And sometimes if the children, if they live very close to school, then they even go in groups. So the children meet at one meeting point together, maybe about 4 or 5 children, and then from there, there's one leader child. And that leader child carries a little flag, and that child has the responsibility of being the leader and guiding the younger students who, I mean, the kids could be 6 years old or 7 years old, for example, in the case of primary school. So, and the leader child is usually older, maybe fifth grader, sixth grader, so they'd be like 11 or 12. So they have responsibility to make sure all the children in their designated group make it to that rendezvous point, and then from there they lead the children to school. And that's a way kind of for children are safer in a group, obviously, and well, Japan is a safe country even if you go alone, but it's just all the safer if you're in a group. And it also creates community, you know, and it creates, it makes one child has to be a leader, so they feel that their responsibilities can grow, and then once they graduate into middle school, then it's the next student's turns, right? So that's an example of responsibility. Another example is in their classrooms, children have the responsibility of cleaning up the classroom every day after school, which is usually around 3 p.m. So that's really cool because in California, there's a janitor who is responsible for cleaning up the rooms after the children finish using them. But in Japan, there is no janitor really. There's just a gardener outside cutting trees or plants, but there's no janitor because in Japan, for children, that's their responsibility. They use that classroom, so children start to learn, okay, if I make a mess here, I'm going to have to clean it up later, or my friends are going to have to clean it up later, my classmates, and they're not going to want to do that. So children begin to really think carefully about, keeping things clean in the classroom because ultimately they're going to have to clean up at the end of the day.
Oh, what a wonderful way to teach agency, isn't it? Like, I feel like it's such a contrast to, like a lot of the responsibilities, because one of my questions will be like, so who assigns these roles for the children, or do the children, Caroline, like some of them say, okay, I want to be one of the leaders, I'm gonna, go ahead and do it, or does a teacher or a director, principal, whoever assigns these roles?
Good question. It usually rotates. So there might be, yes, there are certain children who are assigned to clean the classroom each day, and every day that group rotates. So I think it might be like 4 students at a time. So every day that group of 4 students rotates. Regarding the leader, usually, as far as I know, it was one leader. I always remember seeing my daughter. She before she joined that group, and my daughter was about, I think, 6 and 7 at that time, and there was always one little girl she was 11 or 12 years old, and she always had that little flag. So she was usually the leader. But that because in that group, in that area, she was the oldest student out of that little group of 4 or 5 students. So it was only her. But I imagine that if there happened to be other students her age, maybe like 2 or 3 students who were also 11 years old, then they would probably take turns.
Oh, okay. So I think this is very, very nice to listen because, like I think a lot of us just assume that around the world, like the things are the way they are and people just do whatever, they need to do. But it seems like there's seriously certain communities, certain societies that have different expectations from the people that are living in them. So the fourth and last notion that I wanted to include in this series is the notion of autonomy, and which means, like your self-governance. And the reason why I added this fourth one is because I think like in these modern times, parents, we are really training our kids to be themselves. We are not here to be the constant police forces or watching out all the time, like you're doing it or not. But ultimately, like what we want is people in our societies that don't have to be constantly policed, because it seems like that's a constant contradiction to the notion of real freedom. So how do you see the notion of autonomy being still in at your place, at your house, and in your community, in the society that you're living at?
Regarding my daughter, it's if we give her too much autonomy, then she just ends up using the iPad, her iPad all night, So that's one of my daughter's weaknesses, and we're really trying to, help her to, take care of her duties on her own. She has the same routine every day. For example, we have 2 cats, so she has to give them food, clean their cat toilets, and also put them to bed. She usually goes to bed with them. So we try to keep the same routine every day with her, and I think then that it kind of just becomes so repetitive that we don't have to say anything, and we should be able to just let her continue on her own. But still, that's one of her weak points that we're trying to help her grow in. So I think that having repetition is good for my daughter, for any child. Repetition, having the same routine can be helpful, because then you should reach a point where, okay, I don't have to tell you to do that. You just know how to do that on your own. And then I think that is a way for them to kind of become more independent, and they have to think on their own and remember, okay, I should do this. And then sometimes maybe it's late one night, and then they have to think, okay, well, I came home extra late tonight, so what do I have to do? Do I have to give the cats food? I mean, it's too late. What if the cats get sick or something? So that's one idea how we help her become more independent, And
Yeah, but in general, do you think and you feel like in Japanese society, the way people, are taught since they're children, do that foster autonomy, or do that foster more dependency from the authorities or authority figures? Like, how do you see it?
regarding society, autonomy.
Like, you feel more, like conscious about their own actions and how that affects other, or they're doing it just because they're mainly, like police. Like that's how I feel like we are in this breaking point in around the world of, like really trying to like decide who decides what for whom, and I think that's a very dangerous point, and I think like that's why it's so important to talk to our young children about these, because bottom line, we don't want for our world to repeat past mistakes. I feel like we are into a very important point in history where we can finally realize that we are not living by ourselves. We are living in communities, but who makes decisions? Who really calls the calls? So I was very curious, and actually one of the reasons I wanted to do this contrast between cultures and countries is because we are all trying to raise generations in respectful ways and mindful ways, but definitely the society we are affects those decisions, even if we don't want to, see it that way.
Right. Yeah. For example, I think that just a sense of community in Japan is really strong. Much stronger than in California, for example. I mean, if children are taught from a young age that you have to think about others constantly think about others, and you have to also, I guess in California, it's like, okay, well, think about me first, maybe, think about your own feelings first, and then maybe others. But in Japan, it's like, okay, actually, it's opposite. You should think about others first and then yourself. And so I think that, for example, when it comes to adults, adults in Japan think sometimes too much about others to the point where they themselves become frustrated or emotional or stressed out because we're constantly thinking about others. And we want people to feel comfortable. We want them to be happy. We don't want them to feel unhappy or upset. So that can kind of backfire if you think about somebody else too much.
Yes, because it can get obsessive. Like perhaps, and that what you're telling me is like it cannot make people happy either because it can be too much of a burden.
Right. So there needs to be, of course, that balance, but finding that balance is really tough. I think that in California, the balance is more like, okay, well, I am number one. In Japan, it's like, okay, well, you're not number one. It's actually the person, the partner. So finding that delicate balance is really difficult.
Yes. And why do you think that difference is? Like, I've been thinking so much about, in the way that the countries were formed and founded. Like, I mean, like every time I think about like the mentality here in the United States, I always go back to the Bill of Rights, which, fosters this kind of, mentality that you're allowed to do whatever you want to do because, like you're free. But without, really paying attention, like, like the other things that were happening, around. So I wonder, if, in Japan is, like has something to do with the way the country was founded, like the history of the country and the things that they have struggled with, which for me is one of the strong points for community in Japan. I think after what happened with the huge atomic bomb, which, I think is something that, definitely mark generations till this day. I think that perhaps helped to see beyond the personal more in the community because that was the only way for them in order to survive at that moment and to keep growing as a society. It was either that or just becoming definitely more selfish. And I wonder also if their Zen mentality, like their philosophy also has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I think that, definitely after World War II, that was a big turning point for society here. And it definitely became more Americanized after that. So growing up post World War II, Japanese, I think their mentality just completely changed. And so that's why, samurai movies, for example, from back, they use stories from hundreds of years ago. Those are kind of considered like lost times because now it's just completely different, right, after the war. Much more Americanized. But I can't say there has to be something in history that made Japanese think more about others rather than themselves. I can't say offhand right now, but what I will say is that for Americans, I mean, obviously, America has had the mentality of conquering the USA. There was Manifest Destiny, for example. British colonists arrived on the east coast of North America, and they said, okay, let's from sea to shining sea, let's conquer all of this land. It's all ours, right? And we don't worry about the Indians. They're
Yeah,
here, but
don't worry about the slaves. Don't worry about the other stuff that was happening. And till this day, I think like it's obvious, that it's definitely neglected, even in the classes for history. Like here, like I was very surprised to find out that my children weren't really learning history until later on in middle school. And then it's up to the teacher to teach whatever they want to teach. It's not something that is uniform. So it becomes way more important for us as parents to really understand the history for the territories we are living at first, and also teach our children that these notions are not in a vacuum, that all these things and the ways people act and the ways people interact with each other have a foundation and a why. And that's why, my desire of having this series of listening to parents around the world. One more thing that I want to say is, like, some people watching this and eventually watching this, they will say, well, but neither of you are Japanese. So I want to, because I admit, like, all that I'm saying is from my perspective from the outsider. I'm not Japanese, and as well, you are not Japanese, but you've been living in Japan, and you're active part of that community for how long?
yeah, I've been here in Osaka, in Japan, for 13 years.
Oh, okay. So you speak the language, and you have also your wife is Japanese, so you have a first-hand. I mean, I would have loved to meet her, but I understand not everybody feels comfortable having an IG live. Like, I have my friend Philippines right now that wants to participate in this series, but he told me, like, there's no way I'm going to do an IG live because I don't feel comfortable talking in the screen. And I get it. Not everybody feels comfortable, but we do want to get these stories. We want to document the stories, because bottom line, what we want to teach next generations is that it's all right. It's all right if you don't conform to the society you're living at, or, like, we need to definitely respect the society we're living at, first of all, because there's no other way we can function with others. But we need to decenter our own perspectives and also see other perspectives. That, for me, makes me more hopeful about the future. And also, I think that's the mark of a multicultural child. Multicultural child is multilingual, has a brain that really, can get out of it. Like, say, okay, so maybe this is not thinking this way, this is thinking this other way. And it's easier for a person who really understands these differences between cultures to realize that my way of thinking is not the only one. And it's fine. It's not the end of the world. But I see that a lot of people, sadly, are still in their mentality, like, no, it has to be this way, and this is the only way. And then what we're really creating is a lot of friction and tension that is not really helping the world at this moment, because we are already worldwide united via the website, via the internet. So thank you so much, Caleb. And right now, I'd like to give you the opportunity to kind of like give a little bit more of, biography of who you are, why you do what you do, and promote your wonderful. I mean, first of all, what are the plans for your tours, like, in the future? Right now, everything has changed. So tell us.
Right. Yeah. So prior to the pandemic, I was having bicultural events. So international tourists who have plans to visit Japan, before coming to Japan, they would contact me, and then I would do my best to organize a play dates, or some events where they could cultural events, for example, try on Buddhist garments and learn about Buddhism, for example. So I enjoyed creating these family events, and as a teacher, I've taught from kindergarten all the way up until university. As a teacher, I get a lot of joy by creating such events because I'm a parent as well, and I know that having these opportunities for international children to play and socialize with local children is just something really beautiful and very unique and rare. When tourist families visit Japan, their children don't have opportunities to deeply play with local children. So I'm trying to change that by making events, organizing them, and it's also fun for the parents too, because the international tourist parents can meet Japanese parents as well, and it's a chance for them to talk about parenting, right? Parenting in Japan is different from what it is around the world. So it's a great opportunity for parents and children to socialize, and I'm the mediator, and it's very fulfilling for me as a teacher
Yeah.
and a parent.
And I actually want to say, like, one of the reasons I love to follow your account and what you do is because you do a very respectful and a very cultural approach, rather to perhaps other programs that I have seen around the world that are more like touristly or do not take in consideration the persons of the culture. Because I think that's kind of like one of the biggest issues, like we have all these uh, like prearranged ideas of how people are, or how do you say, like it's like a racial profiling, or like we don't understand that everywhere around the world there's all kinds of people. And I think the issue with the language is huge, like having a person who understands the culture and the language and has respect for the culture is a crucial step to have that bridge.
Yeah, I think that like you said, a lot of travel companies, they're just like making travel events. In my case, I'm a teacher, and then I'm trying to create these events. So I'm coming at travel through the perspective of a teacher. So I want to make it educational, fun for children, and get a little taste of local cultural events. Maybe learning how to use try on ninja or like a samurai suit. Throw in a little bit of that. But for me, I really get joy by creating these bicultural family events, introducing local people to international families, and then sometimes they go out, explore the city, and it's a chance for tourist families to enjoy a deeper travel experience here in Osaka. If I didn't create these events, then the tourist families would just come to Osaka, go to some restaurants, or go to the touristy spots. But that's not really, getting deep and learning and meeting people in a genuine way. So I'm trying to kind of change that.
That's wonderful. So I want to invite everybody to check Caleb's website, Kids Travel Japan. I will upload this video on our website with all your website information and your social media. But I also want to tell people that if they are planning in the long run, not this year,
Yeah, right.
if they're planning to go to Japan, please contact Caleb, because I think that is a wonderful experience. And actually, my daughter has been asking me to visit Japan for her quinceañera. She's like, Mom, I want to go to Japan. And I'm like, okay, so perhaps, like we can create like a special trip for her in which she can go and really learn more about the culture. She's been trying to learn more Japanese herself. As a family, we love Japanese culture. We practice Aikido. And
Oh,
yes, and we love like a lot of the aspects. But what I have to say is like what I admire the most from Japanese culture is their resilience and their community sense. I love having this conversation with you. Thank you so much, Colette, for being so gracious with us. And I'm sorry that I was late. I definitely was like trying to finish something before getting here. And then it was like, oh my goodness. But I really hope this is useful for parents that are raising a multicultural children in this year, 2020, even though we are in a pandemic, we are all together in this raising children. And I'm so glad that we are getting together, even using these forms of media. So do you have anything else to close?
well, no, I just thank you for giving me this opportunity to share, what it's like being a father, being a parent in Japan. So yeah, thank you very much. And if anybody has questions about anything Japan related, parent related, then please feel free to follow and ask away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I hope you guys have a great time, safe time, healthy time. And hopefully we will be keeping touch because I think this series is going to keep growing and growing. Hopefully I'm going to have different parents from different parts of the world. So it's going to be very interesting. And I don't know, maybe it will end up being a book. Who knows?
Great. Well, yeah, it's only going to get better and better. So yeah, I
Oh,
look forward.
yes. Oh, yes. Okay, so thank you so much to everybody who joined in. And this will be live for 24 hours. So check it out while you can. Bye.
Bye bye, mamatortuga.